Last week I talked about the new movie Terrifier 2, which is making people vomit and faint in cinemas. Great. And I wanted to see how scary this movie really was. So producer Pat came over on Friday last week and we did watch Terrifier 2. And here's the thing with this movie, because I love horror movies. I've always said on this show I love horror movies. Even if they're bad, I think they can still be really fun and funny to watch. This movie is a 2.5 hour movie. And I gotta say, and I hope this doesn't disappoint, but it was so boring and bad. It was absolutely terrible in every single way. I didn't enjoy it at all. And here's the thing about these franchise horror movies, these shock franchise horror movies, and I think this is like an important analysis of the horror movie genre in general, right? The problem with these movies is often they have like, they put out a movie, for example, The Terrifier, but take any sort of milked horror movie franchise, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Paranormal Activity, whichever one you want that's like a franchised horror movie. The whole problem with these movies is like they put the first one out and they're like reasonably successful and people like them. But what I don't think they realize is that generally these movies sort of start with the idea of a spooky villain. In the case of The Terrifier, it's Art the Clown, who's a scary clown. You know, we've also got, maybe Pennywise from It, classic scary clown. Art the Clown resembles more of a mime to me than a clown. Like he's like a black and white mime kind of style dude, which I guess is a clown. Like Mr. Mime, the Pokemon, like he's kind of that, not that vibe, but like a black and white mime, a silent antagonist, I suppose you could say. He doesn't speak at all, but he's very expressive, and obviously the whole point of the movie is he just kills people in exceptionally brutal and gory ways, and there is a lot of that. I won't get into details specifically about the deaths, but yeah, if we're ranking the movie on how gory it is and if that's the purpose of the film, great. It's a gory film. If you're into that, you'll see some really gross, fucked up shit, and that's cool. But the thing about horror movie franchises is they start with the idea of a villain. Art the Clown, Freddy Kruger, Jason Voorhees. In Paranormal Activity, which was milked to death, it's more like just the entity, the ghost in the house, I guess. You don't really see it, but that's what I mean. Like that's the villain of those movies. And I'm sure there's heaps more like that, and they have one hit. Friday the 13th is well, maybe Nightmare on Elm Street is a better example, or Halloween with Michael Myers, right? Halloween, the first Halloween movie, is considered almost the pinnacle of what a slasher film should be. And it is really good. So is the original Friday the 13th, where the camera is very much the killer and it's very voyeuristic and very scary in that sense. And only do you see the actual killer at the very end of the films usually. And particularly something like, let's take Freddy Kruger, who's quite an iconic villain from Nightmare on Elm Street. Has an iconic outfit, has an iconic shtick, an iconic image. And then what they do is, okay, they basically say, all right, we've got this villain now. We basically just need to make the same movie again, have the same structure, the same kind of kills, buffer out the story a bit with something pointless and menial, which is exactly what Terrifier 2 does, by the way. Just this stupid, dumb bullshit buffer stuff in the middle of all the kills, because they know that the whole point of these movies is these kills and the villain's sort of iconic power, right? As a visual. And I think that's the thing. And I think Friday the 13th did it a bit differently, because Jason Voorhees doesn't even appear as the killer in the original. Sorry, spoiler alert. It's his mum. In the second one, he does appear, and then but the most interesting thing about Friday the 13th is that Jason Voorhees does not appear in the iconic hockey mask, right? That iconic horror image of Jason in the hockey mask. That doesn't actually happen until Friday the 13th Part 3, the third movie in that franchise. He doesn't even appear in the first one as an adult. And in the second one, he just has a bag over his head. In the third one, that's the first time you see that iconic hockey mask horror image. And it is quite fascinating to see how profoundly iconic that image became when it didn't even appear until the third movie in the franchise. And I can tell you that I've seen most of the Friday the 13th movies, and I can tell you that they get periodically worse. Each time they just become a copy and paste of the one that came before with a slightly different stupid story in between. And it's amazing that became so iconic when it was the third film, and it's been parodied in pretty much everything. You know, it's been in The Simpsons. It's been that hockey mask is synonymous with the horror genre. Didn't appear till the third Friday the 13th movie, right? So basically, these horror movie franchises, they have this villain, whoever it is, and they're like, now we just need to get him to kill a lot of people and turn it into a movie by having some pointless dumbass story in the middle and make up this stupid lore around it and just, you know, whatever we need to do to make it a movie. And you know what? The return for them is pretty good. For Friday the 13th had 10 movies that basically came out year after year. First one, I think, came out in 1981. The next ones were 1982, 83, 84, 85. Like, it was just every year, let's just make another one for Halloween. And each one made slightly less money, but they were still making enough money to justify making those movies. Bringing it back to Terrifier, and this is going to be, I genuinely do believe that Terrifier will be the next iconic horror movie villain. I'm not saying that they're good movies. I thought the movie was absolute trash and really boring with some great gory scenes if that's what you're into in horror movies. But I do think Terrifier as a villain, physically in the way he looks, in his vibe, in his on-screen presence, does rival characters like Jason, Freddy Kruger, Michael Myers, and other iconic horror villains. And I think we're not just going to stop at Terrifier 2. There's going to be a Terrifier 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe then it'll stop making money, and then maybe in 30 years they'll make a reboot of Terrifier. Right? I can already see it happening. I'm going to call it now. Set an alarm for 30 years from now and tell me I'm wrong. Because they've done it. They've done a Halloween reboot and turned it into another 3 movies. They did a Friday the 13th reboot, right? They did a Nightmare on Elm Street reboot. They just did a new Paranormal Activity movie. They just let it rest for a bit, let people forget about it, bring it back. Suddenly, all right, we make another $50 million. That's not bad. And they're probably really cheap films to make as well. Terrifier 2, really bad, but can tell you for a fact that Art the Clown will enter the horror movie Hall of Fame as a character. And I think it will be a long-running franchise in horror. So that's my thoughts on that. You know, horror franchises, they start with a character, with the idea of a scary character, and then they just milk it, milk the cow, milk it for all the money you can make out of it, squeeze it dry, let the cow die, then get another cow in 30 years and bring it back. I mean, really, that's just what Hollywood's all about now, what everything's all about now, but you see it in these horror franchises a lot. I think even stuff like Child's Play, which was Chucky, you know, the evil doll, that's another one that's the exact same format. You had Child's Play 2, you know, Bride of Chucky, Seed of Chucky, and then they, you know, there was probably like 5 or 6 of those movies. Then they let it die, and then they just brought it back as a TV series. They had a Chucky TV series or a Child's Play TV series, and that's another one that's been parodied. I mean, go and watch The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episodes over the years. You'll see parodies of pretty much every horror movie ever made. Those are so funny, and yeah, I think it's just interesting to see. I find horror movies so interesting because they seem to depend so much on that iconic horror villain that uneasy feeling you get when you see a character like Art the Clown, like Freddy, like Jason. Anyway,